Hello, everybody. This is Peter Cipcowski, and this is another in the series of conversations with Roe Jan area community citizens. And today we have a unique opportunity to talk to a friend of our community, Dennis Wedlick. Dennis Wedlick is an architect and is the co-chair of the American Institute of Architects Knowledge Committee and is very engaged in conversations around residential design and residential neighborhoods. So I'm really happy to have Dennis here, who is also my old friend. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, so glad to be here. So glad to have this conversation. And I want to congratulate you on making this happen because it's just incredible and it's so important right now.
These conversations have been great and so much fun and a record for generations to come of this unique moment in time. So thank you. Why don't you start, Den, by just talking a little bit about your personal history, your professional history?
Well, as it relates to our community here in Columbia County, it goes back to 1985, which is when I was still working in New York City for Philip Johnson, and I received an opportunity to do a moonlighting job in Hillsdale. And it would be to design little homes on Knapp Hollow Lane in Hillsdale. And I remember the first time I drove up the Taconic and went over that crest of that hill where you get the whole lay of Northern Dutchess and Columbia County right in front of you, and just said, this is where I want to be home. And it took quite a while to get a business going that could sustain me and my husband to live there for full time. But we persevered and we did it. We opened an office in Hudson, New York. So we had one in New York City and one in Hudson, my firm that is. And then eventually we're now living up here full time, which has just been incredible.
You know, one of the wonderful things about your design sensibility, I think, is how it connects to the environment. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy of connecting your designs with the surroundings, the beauty of our surroundings?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And again, it was Columbia County that taught me how important that was. The first commission that I received was for these small homes to be set in different landscapes in Hillsdale. And they varied quite a bit. This small 40-acre parcel had woodlands and it had open meadows, it had wetlands. And quite quickly I learned, how important it is, the relationship between a home and the landscape, because you don't want things to change when everything is so beautiful. And so an architect coming in, adding a home and a driveway, and trees have to be cut, and a septic system, and so when you leave, you want it to look as good as it was when you got there. And for me personally, the landscape, the natural landscape is what's so incredible about Columbia County, as well as the landscape that has remained in farming. So I had to learn. I had to learn what I didn't know in school. I couldn't learn in school. And I come from working with a commercial architect, so I couldn't learn, from building skyscrapers, how to relate to the environment. And so the desire to preserve it taught me about things like capturing the natural breezes and the sunlight and incorporating all those wonderful free resources that the landscape offers and making better homes for it.
Interesting. And you also have been, and now I know you're very involved in thinking about neighborhoods. How does that relate to your new focus?
Yeah, well, so interestingly enough, my first commission was to design a whole neighborhood. It was a whole neighborhood of homes, 7, 8 homes. And I had to think about something beyond just the footprint, just the front yard, the backyard. I had to think about how I was going to put a road in and how should it end and can the fire trucks get down there? And suddenly I had to think about how a development might impact the surroundings too, because you would need the surrounding neighbors to go along with it because you have to get approval for such things. So it taught me how connected the community is, and the character of a community is, to both the natural landscape and to those that live there, and to those that lived there before you got there, and those that will live there in future generations. The disconnect that I had for so many years was how to be able to create a residential architectural solution that would contribute to everybody, and not just people that could afford to hire an architect. And I was so lucky. About 10 years ago, Columbia County Habitat for Humanity approached me and said, you know, what you do for custom home builders, we think we could do for our families if we work together. And so we formed a team of volunteers, volunteer engineers and landscape designers and architects, and we learned that we can take those technologies that we developed from the more custom end homes and apply them to homes for everybody. And by making individual homes better, neighborhoods are better. And that's been such a learning experience that it's been just incredible.
You've been working with Brenda Adams, the executive director of Habitat in Columbia County, who's now the supervisor in the town of Canaan. You've also had conversations with our housing committee, because housing that is affordable, housing that accommodates the needs of lots of different folks is part of our comprehensive plan, and trying to help them figure out what that might look like in the town of Hillsdale. Tell us a little bit more about the model of Habitat and why that is so compelling and effective.
Well, you know, we started out with the first project being in Hudson, which doesn't seem to reflect what most of Columbia County is like, because it's more like a city than the rest of the county. But where we learned in Hudson is if we could take the technologies that we were using on much more expensive homes and much larger properties, and apply it onto teeny tiny lots, you know, they're only maybe 25 feet wide, these properties in Hudson, 25 feet wide and maybe 100 feet deep. Can we take all of that technology that we apply to these bigger homes and have it work for these smaller, tiny homes? And so we figured out that the most cost-effective way to do that was to build 2 homes at a time. So they were like mother-daughter homes. And so that even though they were tiny, they were twice as big, because it's all fit under one roof, and you have, you know, an entrance toward the right for one family, an entrance toward the left for the other family. But what's different than a townhouse is they have a front yard and a backyard and a side yard that they own all to themselves. Now, we came to that conclusion because that is the Habitat model. They want their families to own their home and to own as much of the land around them. But once we came to that suggestion, and we were able to realize that we can cost effectively produce really, really high quality homes, suddenly everybody was interested in, you know, how can we take the work that you were doing with Columbia County Habitat for Humanity and apply it to other situations. So we began to have conversations with Columbia Land Conservancy, conversations with Scenic Hudson, conversations with Hawthorne Valley, conversations with every community. I mean, every community. We have ongoing conversations with Philmont and Valatia and Ankrondale and Nairville, and again in Hillsdale. And what we learned also is the state also is interested in this. How can we develop the highest quality home in a way that could be affordable for people? So that's New York State Energy Research Development Authority and New York State Housing and Community and Redevelopment. And so it just kept growing and growing. And you know, that has been incredibly eye-opening, how much impact just helping one family into a home can help the whole community become more sustainable.
How have you partnered with the Hillsdale Housing Committee in particular around Habitat?
Well, the best way that we can introduce our ideas to different towns is to have what we call a workshop, which essentially is we show them hypothetically how we might build what we did in another community just before them. So what we would do is sit down with, as we did with Hillsdale, and we say, well, this is what we did in Ancramdale, and this is the kind of this is the type of land they had to work with, and this is how we subdivided it into 2 parcels. And so we could walk them through with more than just the nuts and bolts of the building, but the kind of community participation you need, the kind of buy-in you need, the kind of support you'll need from all the planning department and the zoning department, the kind of variances you will pursue. And then you kind of show them how the intentions of their master plan are met by this process. And whether they do it exactly the same way or not is not important. What's important is they have, you know, some real example to look at, some real case study. And then they get to meet the people that live in these homes, and they realize that how their lives got better, and they get to talk to neighbors and realize how their neighborhood got better for allowing this kind of growth to happen.
What is it that makes these structures, the habitat structures, so affordable to the families that live in them? I know you build them in an affordable way, but ultimately, why is it a benefit for the owners?
Well, the big benefit is the carrying costs. And I think that many people don't realize how it's the month-to-month cost that is making housing unaffordable for most families in Columbia County. And the statistics are phenomenal. It could be as much as 80% of the people that live in Columbia County are house poor, meaning that they spend up to 50% of their income on the monthly costs. So the way we build these homes, they're very low monthly costs. We build them in such a way that the taxes are reduced because they're a twin unit, so therefore their taxes are reduced. Mm-hmm. We build them in such a way that they're compact in size, so that keeps the value of the home down, which keeps the insurance costs down. And then we build them in such a way that they have very little money is needed to be spent on maintenance because they're so tightly sealed and they're built with such high quality, low maintenance materials. And lastly, there's hardly any utility bill. So the families could be living in a home and looking at utility bills that are $400 sometimes a month with some of these winters that we face somewhere else, and they move into one of our homes and it never gets more than $100 a month. And that difference between $400 a month and $100, helps to pay for tires, helps to pay for an unexpected dental, procedure. It just makes a huge difference. We have one woman who moved into one of our homes, and she had 6 jobs when she was living in the previous apartment to cover the costs. And after she moved into one of our homes, she was able to go down to 1 job to cover the monthly costs. And she had the security to enable herself to start her own business. So you can just imagine the impact that has on a community when you have somebody who dedicates their lives to healthcare, as this woman did, and suddenly she is now secure with her monthly expenses and building businesses. So it's really been incredible that this whole key is building highest quality homes possible for these families.
And placing them in a neighborhood.
And placing them in a neighborhood, yeah. I mean, the key is that you don't want to create clusters of housing that seems to split communities up. So you want to weave all families together, and you want to take advantage of the little pieces of property that have been underdeveloped. And a lot of times people don't realize how much land is available that could fit another family in, because just to look at it, from afar, it looks like everything is filled up. But the thing is that it doesn't take a lot of space to have a new family come in. And generally, It makes the sidewalk safer because there's another set of eyes on the street. Takes away some dark spots. I mean, quite often you have people, you know, using undeveloped land to throw a refrigerator on. So you actually make the whole block and the whole community better by weaving in new homes.
Yeah, our housing committee is passionate about finding a place, but ultimately it comes to someone donating land. How does that process typically work with Habitat?
Well, it varies. The Habitat for Humanity has opportunities that they come upon because towns sometimes have lands that they're not using any longer and that they can sell. That's the case in Philmont, a project that they're exploring right now. They had a piece of property that was being used for utility storage of town equipment that they don't need to use that way any longer. So they could sell it. And but other times, and it comes to a donation. Now, in Niverville, for example, Columbia Land Conservancy is taking land that was donated to them that really doesn't work, you know, for farming, and is hoping to redonate that land to Columbia County Habitat for Humanity because it would be perfect for to get a family on. Other times, it's individuals. They realize that there's a part of their property that is underutilized, and they're looking for a way to develop it without developing it. You know, with way to make it better without taking on the project themselves of having a development take place. It's not easy to develop. You know, that is why you see so few new homes being developed. It takes a huge amount of effort. It takes a big amount of community preparation. So a lot of private property owners just don't have the wherewithal to do that, but would be really happy if they could see their property better used.
Yeah, yeah. Now, in conversations that you've had with the Hillsdale Housing Committee, who have done so much analysis around the need for housing that is affordable in our community, like most communities in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York, and so on, you've taken some walks with them around the hamlet, and you've tried to identify possible locations. Tell us a little bit about the ideas that you've had to improve the fabric of the hamlet. I know that you have great respect for the PPS plan, for example. Mm-hmm. How does the desire for housing integrate with a larger PPS plan that is part of Hillsdale's comprehensive plan?
Right, and it's the same with Hillsdale as it has been with other communities. I mean, generally, Columbia County is really fortunate to have, you know, very active and very knowledgeable members on their planning board and on their town supervisors, the town boards, and they have really wonderful subcommittees who have, you know, done a lot of their homework. What I do is help them understand the nuts and bolts of, you know, how much of a space does a driveway really take? You know, how much space does a septic field need if you can't hook up to the public septic, and where does a well have to go, and you know, how much light would it take away from a neighbor's yard or that? So I walked them through first, looking at just random places, and like in the hamlet, random places, and say, do you realize how much space is in this parking area? It's this, you know, it looks like it's not a very large parking area, but if you used it slightly differently, you'd get more parking spaces in it, and you could fit 4 homes on here. And they would look at me like I've got 2 heads. But that is why you would need to have a conversation that goes round robin. You don't wait to get the land to talk about something. You look at the possibilities so that you can educate the community, so that the property owners can be educated for the potential of what can happen. And then you start to understand how it ties into the what I would say the adjacent needs and uses. So, you know, how is it going to make the road better for the stores that, you know, are in that area? Because right now there's no curb. So if you put 4 houses in, you'll have a curb, and then you'll have a way for the water to run off, and rather than just sit and puddle in the parking area, which causes freezing. And then, you know, so you start to understand how neighboring properties, a very good example of that is in Philmont, where we're looking at building in Philmont, neighbors' yards are flooded all the time. And if we build these homes in this particular location, all that rainwater will be caught within this yard, which will be built to handle that rainwater. So suddenly other neighbors, other properties become better, more valuable, easier to maintain, cheaper to maintain. And the only way to understand that is to go what I call round robin. It's before you get the parking lot donated, have an understanding what the impact could be, you know, to build homes in the parking lot. That might then help the person who owns the parking lot rethink what they're using it for, which then might help the neighbor across the street to say, oh, it would be so great if you did this. So you start to get a very positive conversation going. And that's the kind of work we've been doing with Hillsdale Housing Community.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, and I could talk to you about this all day, but in Hillsdale, through our comprehensive plan and the PPS plan in particular, which is focused on the hamlet, we know that we have a set of problems to solve, right? Municipal parking, just creating a better network, access to the rail trail, which is now becoming a major component of our town's future, with the bridge being built over Route 22 later next year. And of course, this beautiful Hamlet Park, which is quite invisible, and various empty lots and that kind of thing. So this discussion is fascinating to us. Any advice, free advice for Hillsdale as we think about these problems that we have to solve?
Well, I think the most important thing is to come together as a community and be open and honest about the way you feel about change. I mean, we live in an area that is really beautiful. And so I think change is very frightening when you live in a beautiful area. When you live in an area that's downtrodden, it's not frightening. You beg for change. But if you look more closely, it's not all that beautiful everywhere, not for everyone. And that's what really is the problem. It's that there's many, many people that are living in conditions that are so poor, eventually they just have to give up and leave. And these are people that don't want to leave. I mean, if they wanted to leave, it's easy to leave. It's cheaper to live elsewhere. They're woven into this community. They love it as much as anyone loves it. And the people that move in here don't want them to leave because that's what makes this place. It's the history of everybody that's been here, and it's the character of everybody that lives here that makes them want to live here. Nobody wants change, but it's not as pretty as you think it is. That's what I'm saying. You have to look more closely and see that there's a lot of spots that can be made better for everybody. And those spots that can be made better mostly have to do with housing. Those spots that are mostly depressed mostly have to do with poor quality housing. And we can do it. We can make it better. We have the drive to make it better. We have the enthusiasm to make it better. And we have the compassion to make it better. So we just need to be honest about what our fears are and get through it.
Dennis, I have to ask you about where we are now in terms of the pandemic and how this sort of factors into all of this in your life. It's May 27th, 2020. We've been sequestered now for a couple of months. How are you guys doing, and how is this impacting your profession and your personal life?
Well, you have to keep in mind that I'm in the profession of dreamers. So we like to say there are no problems, only opportunities. And yes, people are suffering, but we always look for the silver lining. And I will say that having this opportunities is proven to enable us to connect with people in ways like this, that we would never have been able to do before. I would also say it helps with a lot of our mission, which is to say how important housing is, and the health of a person's home is to the quality of life of a place. And it's important to our mission of making sure that everybody can afford housing, because we can't conserve our rural region without our rural workers. And I think people realize that people that teach in our schools, if they don't live in the community where they teach, they're not going to be there in a pandemic like this to go visit, their students. And if we live in a community that doesn't have workers that live here, they're not going to be able to drive in. I've heard of communities in Colorado that actually literally shut their door to people that owned homes there because they weren't there at the time when the pandemic broke out. So having a community that is sustainable, it's so important to have homes that are sustainable and to have a quality of life that's sustainable. So for me, this pandemic is showing the importance of all those things. And I am really, really excited about all of the response that we've gotten. People are just continuously connecting in more ways. And I think that's a great thing.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Dennis. It's great chatting with you. We always love, working with you. I know that the Housing Committee has been inspired by your vision and your recommendations and your challenges. So thank you for all of that, and be safe.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, and thank you, Hillsdale. I always love visiting Hillsdale, and I always love the reception I got. So every time I come, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.